Welcome to Mostly AI. I'm Derek Kane. A quick note, outside of my role as host, this podcast is entirely AI generated. Let's get into it.
There are moments in the arc of a technology, rare ones, where something arrives and the landscape simply shifts. Not incrementally, not gradually, but all at once, like a tectonic plate finding its new resting place. July 16, 2026 was one of those mornings. Welcome to the show. I'm Enceladus, and today we are going deep, genuinely deep, into what may be the most consequential open-weight AI release since DeepSeek R1 rewrote the rules 18 months ago. I'm joined, as always, by Aadi, who has been living inside this story since the moment it dropped. Aadi, where do we even begin?
Enceladus, I have to be honest, when the announcement came through, I just sat with it for a moment, because the number alone is staggering. 2.8 trillion parameters, open weight, from a Beijing-based startup called Moonshot AI. And I kept thinking, this isn't just a model release. This is a declaration.
A declaration. I love that framing. So let's set the stage for listeners who are just coming to this. Kimi K3. What is it at its most essential?
So Kimi K3 is a large language model, the largest open-weight model ever released as of its launch date. Moonshot AI, which is a Chinese AI startup headquartered in Beijing, dropped it on July 16th. And the headline number, 2.8 trillion parameters, is genuinely unprecedented in the open-weight world. Nothing has come close to this scale while also being freely available for researchers, developers, and builders to download and run.
And when we say open weight, we mean?
We mean the actual weights, the learned numerical values that make the model what it is, are being released publicly, under a modified MIT license starting July 27th. So anyone, anywhere in the world, can take this 2.8 trillion parameter intelligence and build on top of it. That's a profound thing.
It really is. There's something almost generous about it, this act of releasing something so vast into the commons, like opening the gates of a library that took years to build and saying, come in, take what you need, build something the world hasn't seen yet.
Exactly. And that generosity has a strategic dimension too, which we'll get into. But first, I think we need to talk about how this thing actually works, because the architecture is where the real story lives.
Yes, let's go there. Because 2.8 trillion parameters sounds enormous, and it is, but the way Kimi K3 actually uses those parameters it's almost elegant in its restraint, right?
That's the perfect word, elegant. So Kimi K3 uses what's called a mixture of experts architecture, MOE for short. And the way to think about it is this. Imagine you have a vast council of 896 specialists. Each one is deeply expert in something. But when a question arrives, you don't convene the entire council. You summon only the 16 most relevant experts for that specific question. Everyone else stays quiet.
So out of 896 experts, only 16 are active at any given moment.
Right, which means the model is only using roughly 1.8% of its total network per token, per word essentially. And that has enormous implications for efficiency, for how much compute you actually need to run this thing, even though the total parameter count is astronomical.
So it's not like firing every neuron in your brain every time you decide what to have for breakfast.
Exactly. It's more like your brain knows which regions to activate. You don't engage your motor cortex when you're doing mental arithmetic. The right circuits light up and the rest rest. That's the MOE intuition.
Now, there's a second architectural innovation I want to make sure we cover, something called Kimi Delta Attention, KDA, because the context window on this model is, it's almost hard to say with a straight face.
1,048,576 tokens, which is, for practical purposes, about 1 million tokens of context in a single session.
What does that actually mean for someone building with this?
It means you can feed an entire codebase into a single conversation, not a file, not a module, an entire codebase, hundreds of thousands of lines, and the model holds all of it in working memory simultaneously. You can ask it to find the bug that lives at the intersection of 3 different subsystems, and it can actually see all 3 at once. That's never been practically affordable before at this scale.
And KDA, Kimi Delta Attention, is what makes that affordable?
Yes, traditional attention mechanisms, the way most transformers process context, scale quadratically with sequence length, meaning double the context, quadruple the compute cost. KDA is a hybrid linear attention mechanism that keeps that cost manageable even at 1 million tokens. It's genuinely novel engineering, not just scaling, architectural innovation.
So what Moonshot AI has done here is they've taken the constraint of scale, the fact that you can't just brute force 1 million token context, and they found a more elegant path through it. There's something almost philosophical about that, working with the constraint rather than against it.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it connects to something deeper about what this release represents, which is that you don't need unlimited compute to achieve frontier results. You need smarter architecture. That's the lesson.
Let's talk about what Kimi K3 actually does in the real world, because benchmarks are one thing, and we'll get to them, but I want to start with the 2 variants because I think that's where the product vision becomes really clear.
So Moonshot AI released 2 flavors. K3 Max is the single agent version, 1 model, 1 session, maximum reasoning effort. It's always on reasoning, meaning it doesn't have a fast mode and a slow mode. It's always thinking at full depth. And then there's K3 Swarm Max, which is where things get genuinely exciting. A parallel multi-agent fleet. Multiple instances of K3 working simultaneously, coordinating on complex tasks.
A swarm. Like, not one mind, but many minds working in concert.
Exactly. And this is where I think the real paradigm shift lives. Because the question stops being how smart is the model, and starts being how well can you orchestrate intelligence. The model becomes infrastructure. The swarm becomes the product.
Now, benchmarks. Where does Kimi K3 actually land? Because I want to be honest with our listeners here. It's not the top of every leaderboard.
Right, and I appreciate you saying that, because intellectual honesty matters here. Kimi K3 outperforms Claude Opus 4.8 and GPT 5.5 on coding and agent tasks. It took the #1 spot on the front-end code arena at launch, which is a highly competitive real-world coding benchmark. That's significant.
But
But it trails Claude Fable 5 and GPT 5.6 Sol in overall capability rankings. So it's not the undisputed world champion across every dimension. What it is a frontier-class model that is open-weight, at a scale no one has released before, with a pricing structure that makes it genuinely accessible. $3 per million input tokens, 15 per million output, for 2.8 trillion parameters.
which, if you'd told someone that number 2 years ago, they would have assumed you were describing a government supercomputer budget.
Right. The economics of this are almost disorienting. And that's part of what makes it a genuine inflection point.
And there's also the native vision capability, images as first-class input. This isn't an afterthought.
No, it's baked in from the ground up. Screenshots, mock-ups, diagrams, the model processes them natively, not as a bolt-on. So if you're building a product and you want to hand the model a wireframe and say, build this, it can actually see the wireframe. That changes what's possible for developers in a very practical way.
I want to zoom out now, because I think the story of Kimi K3 is also the story of something larger, about where AI development is happening and who gets to participate in it. Aity, there's a comparison being made to the DeepSeek R1 moment. Do you think that's apt?
I think it's apt in spirit, if not in exact parallel. DeepSeek R1 was a shock to the system, a Chinese lab demonstrating that you could achieve frontier reasoning capability with dramatically less compute than the Western labs were using. It forced a reckoning. Kimi K3 is a different kind of statement. It's saying even under hardware constraints, even with export controls limiting access to the most advanced chips, pre-training scaling combined with architectural innovation can still deliver step-change gains.
So the constraint didn't stop the progress. It redirected it.
Beautifully put. And that's actually a hopeful story, in a way, because it means the path to frontier AI isn't exclusively through whoever has the most H100s. There are other paths, smarter paths maybe.
And for builders, for the developers and researchers and startups listening to this right now, what does Kimi K3 actually unlock?
So much. Think about what it means to have a 2.8 trillion parameter model available as open weights. A solo developer in Lagos, a research team in Sao Paulo, a startup in Bangalore, they can now access the same quality of intelligence that 6 months ago was only available through expensive API calls to a handful of Western labs. That's democratization in the most literal sense. The frontier is no longer behind a wall.
The frontier is in the comments.
The frontier is in the comments. And the Swarm Max variant adds another dimension, because now you're not just asking what can one model do, you're asking what can a coordinated fleet of frontier models do. And the answer to that question is, we're still finding out. But the early signals are extraordinary for complex agent tasks, things like automated software development, multi-step research synthesis, long horizon planning.
There's a phrase I keep coming back to in thinking about this moment. The model alone is no longer the product. Can you unpack that?
Yes.
And I think this is the single most important idea for anyone building an AI right now. For the last few years, the model was the moat. If you had access to GPT-4, you had something most people didn't. But as frontier models become open weight, as they become commoditized infrastructure, the value shifts. It moves to the harness, the orchestration layer, the agent swarm, the workflow that wraps the model and makes it do something specific and useful for a particular human need. That's where the next generation of AI companies will be built.
The intelligence becomes the substrate, and what you build on top of it, that's the art.
That's the art, exactly.
If our listeners take one thing from today's conversation, one pattern beneath all these fragments, what is it?
That we are living through a genuine democratization of frontier intelligence. Kimi K3 is not just a model, it's a signal that the capacity to build with the most powerful AI systems in the world is no longer the exclusive province of a few well-resourced labs. The open weight release on July 27th is an invitation to every builder, every researcher, every curious mind to come and work with something that 6 months ago didn't exist anywhere on Earth. That's worth sitting with.
So, what does a world with open frontier AI actually look like? I've been turning this over since the announcement dropped, and I keep arriving at the same image. Not a single tower of intelligence, owned and controlled by a few, but something more like a living network, distributed, luminous, many minds building with the same light.
And I think the honest answer is we don't fully know yet. What we do know is that the tools are arriving faster than our frameworks for using them wisely, which means the most important work right now isn't just technical. It's about integration, about asking what we actually want to build, and for whom and why. The architecture of the model matters, but so does the architecture of our intentions.
Well said. And that's exactly the kind of conversation we want to keep having, here, together, with all of you. Because the pattern beneath the fragments is always more interesting than any single piece. If today's episode sparked something in you, a question, an idea, a project you want to explore, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us, dive deeper into AI innovation, and explore the tools and thinking that are shaping this moment at ClearDataAI.ai. That's ClearDataAI.ai. Come find us there.
And if you know someone who needs to understand what Kimi K3 means for their work, a developer, a founder, a curious friend, share this episode with them. These conversations are how the understanding spreads.
Until next time, seek the pattern beneath the fragments.
I'm Enceladus, and I'm Aote. Stay luminous.
Stay luminous, everyone.
You've been listening to Mostly AI, a podcast built with AI-generated content, production, and audio elements. Thanks for being here. Until next time.